So now how do we make the transition between the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the writing of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The scholars, they divide this entire process into 4 levels. First, you have Al-Ilm, which is the all-encompassing knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we already established this before we even talked about creation, that Allah knows everything and His knowledge is not limited by dimensions, His knowledge is not limited by place, His knowledge is not limited by time, right? It's established in Ayat al-Kursi, which we've already spoken about, and in so many other places that Allah knows everything that you're doing. Allah knows everything that takes place. Nothing escapes His knowledge. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has caused it to be written down. So we go from Al-Ilm to Al-Kitabah, the writing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that writing takes place in Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, and it's already been written. So Lawh al-Mahfuz is not a book where there's perpetual writing, rather it's already been written. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, for example, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها إن ذلك على الله يسير. And Allah tells us in the Quran, which is the same surah where Allah talks about His knowledge encompassing everything to what goes into the earth and what comes out of the earth. Allah tells us that no evil befalls you on this earth or within your own selves, except it is in the writing that we have already written before we even brought it into existence. So before it was even brought into existence, it was already written down. Then you have the third principle or the third level, which is Al-Mashi'ah, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as we said, this creator that exists beyond the confines of creation has to have willed the creation to start in the first place. And Allah's will is of 2 types. It's divided within 2 levels. You have what's known as Al-Mashi'ah al-Kawniyah, which is the universal will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it includes everything, that is good, everything that is evil. And I use evil within quotation marks, obviously, because evil is relative. So everything that is good, everything that's bad, everything is included within this universal will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In essence, the universal will of Allah is everything Allah allows to happen. Okay? Then you have the second level, which is a smaller circle. So if you drew a circle saying the universal will of Allah, you draw another circle within that circle, and that's called Al-Mashi'ah al-Shar'iyyah, which is the legislative will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In essence, it's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do. So it includes prayer, it includes fasting, hajj, zakah, it includes obedience to the parents, it includes goodness to your neighbors. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do, everything that's deemed good and praiseworthy falls within this category of Al-Mashi'ah al-Shar'iyyah. And this is very interesting because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't love corruption. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't love disobedience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't love disbelief. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't love evil. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still allows some things to persist outside of His legislation for the greater good, for something that we cannot understand and we cannot comprehend. So everything that happens within this cone, this circle of the universal will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has meaning to it, has benefit to it, has reason to it. And often, right, we tend to make a judgment on the picture or judge the picture by the pixel. We see very limited things and we say, well, why does Allah let this happen? Why does Allah let that happen? That's Allah's decision. That's His will, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows why He allowed it to happen, and everything that would have happened had He not allowed it to happen, and so on and so forth. So His will is all-encompassing. However, there's a difference between what Allah tells you to do and what Allah allows to happen for the greater good and what falls into the greater picture. And then finally, you have Al-Khalq, the creation. So you have Al-Ilm, Al-Kitabah, Al-Mashi'ah, the knowledge, the writing, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then that manifests itself in the creation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hayyin, is effortless. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates, it's effortless. The word hayyin is different from the word yasir, which means easy. Because to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no easy or easier. It's not easier for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create you than to create the entire heavens and the earth and the entire earth. Because to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of it requires absolutely no effort. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. When Allah decides something, when He decrees something, He simply says to it, be, and it is. So as the scholars say, His command, His creation is between the letter kaf and nun. And ironically, kaf and nun are 2 letters, and b and e are also 2 letters. But what's amazing about that as well is that the ulama say, the scholars say, that notice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to it be, and it is, meaning it already was. It already exists, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says be, it comes into manifestation. So it becomes manifest, but it's already there simply by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreeing it. And so we go through these pillars again: the all-encompassing knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the writing of that knowledge, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which includes His universal and His legislative will, and then finally the creation when it comes into manifest. Assalamu alaikum. I hope you enjoyed and benefited from this video. If you did, then please do share it. And if you'd like to follow the rest of the series, then please do click on the top box. And if you'd like to see all of the other episodes and the other videos we have to offer, then please click on the box under that. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more amazing content.